before to questions. Yes, President Asalsa first.
Thank you very much to our two excellent speakers. We are indeed very lucky that we had two excellent speakers. You gave several pointers, not only for the work that we can do at present, but also the work that we can do in the future. So I really like the outlook that you have given and all the other recommendations that the Division Concepcion has given. Now, I'd like to open up another area for discussion, and this is pollution. A very important concern. I just had, I went to a legislative forum. Actually, it was a hearing, and Senator Villar was the one heading it. So, well, she was a bit, how do you call this, pleasant. She's pleasant, actually. And she recognizes the help that the science and technology people can give the legislators and managers of pollution. Now, let me also point out that the marine environment, especially in our case, is a big portion of our territory. It's 70% of our territory. We're only 30% land. And most of this pollution are going into the sea. Now, can you come up with a convergent, transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary, in fact, it can be multidisciplinary approach to the pollution problem? I think that would be a very important how do you call this, S&T, and even innovation concern. So that's my, and can you give some comments on that? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Okay, once you start talking about environmental pollution, I can stay here for a whole day, maybe more, because that's really my area. So I'm an environmental engineer and a microbiologist, and really combine those two fields, and that's exactly what we're trying to answer. So in terms of marine pollution, we can think about human waste is one thing. A lot of our small islands, where the sewage goes, and that's not just us. I was a consultant for U.S. State Department for Montenegro, which is a country in the Baltic area, and they don't really have a lot of wastewater treatment plants. And a lot of the waste basically go out, you have a few kilometers of pipe that goes, basically to the sea. And essentially, they're basically saying, it's dilution, right? Dilution is the solution to their pollution. And still, a lot of our waste, if you think about all of the resort islands and so on, if they don't have proper treatment systems, they don't have proper wastewater treatment plants or septic tanks, and even septic tanks, they're not fully treating the waste. So for example, in Metro Manila, about 20% of Metro Manila is sewered. In other words, when you flush the toilet, it goes into a sewer line, and that's only 20% of Metro Manila. The other 80%, actually, some of that goes to septic tanks, but these are not really properly designed septic tanks. They are really just settling chambers for the solid waste, and the liquid goes out and it goes into drainage canals, eventually into the Pasig River or Marikina River, and it goes to the bay. And so eventually it does all go into the sea. It's marine pollution. So in terms of that pollution, we can think about things like BOD, biochemically, oxygen demand, biochemical oxygen demands, organics that are there. You can think about pathogens that are there. And you can think about maybe all of these other things that we flush down the toilet. What are these other things? Well, we have these emerging contaminants. There's always emerging contaminants, right? For example, in the US now, we're worried about perfluorinated substances, PFAS, PFOA, because they seem to be always there, and forever chemicals. You might hear that term now. They're always there. It seems to be very hard to degrade, and you can find them anywhere. And these are originally from things like production of Teflon, DuPont, all of the additives and stuff that we put on our clothing and products. These are the profit. We only have 20% in Metro Manila, and 80% will be septic tanks or even untreated wastes. So we have to do a better job in terms of controlling and treating what we can collect and treat, so industrial wastewater. We just have to implement it inside of it. And the second thing is coming up with new treatment technologies and pathways. I talked about organics, but nitrogen and phosphorus, nutrients are a big thing, right? Because that leads to eutrophication and so on. And where do these come from? Well, again, point sources, and also non-point sources, runoff and so on. Big issue also in the U.S. The Bay, the Gulf of Mexico is really, it's turning anoxic. Well, it's been anoxic for a while, but huge area. Lack of DO, dissolved oxygen, because of nitrogen and phosphorus contamination. And in the Philippines, same thing. We're damaging our very beautiful coasts and our very beautiful marine life. So what do we do with non-point source pollution? Well, okay, that again comes to thinking about where does the runoff come from? What do we put out into the environment? In terms of what we can do as microbiologists, I think we have to do a better job of pointing out to policymakers, to government officials. You mentioned one who I heard was a little bit skeptical of research and science. Not anymore, okay. It's very, it's difficult, right? Because at the same time, they're using the products of science and engineering. They go on the web and where do you think that came from? That science. The whole vaccine issue, that's science. So we have to do a better job of convincing our policymakers and even our people, the public, that science is what fuels development. Science is critical, and we have to do a better job at it because in reality, all of society, not just here but everywhere, there's a lot of skepticism, and unfortunately, I guess the education of the public, this fake news thing is really harmful. And so we have to do a better job of communicating what we do, how it actually leads to development, how it protects the public. And that's an ongoing process. That's very hard. That we're just not after the research, that we're really after development, and it can be translated into practice. And obviously, what's happening with DOST and the national government, we're all trying to do the same things. So unfortunately, that still is the case. There is a lot we can do. I think in the Philippines, we have a lot of potential. We have a lot of the same problems. We're thinking of these unique ways, drug discoveries, for example, in chipworms, and we have all of these diversity. We had a project in Mount Makiling, just looking at the diversity and what we can do with thermophiles and enzymes and so on. So it's possible for us to have a niche, again, a competitive advantage in the world. And again, the excellent scientists, Academician Concepcion is one of those, right? And you can see leading edge publications. So we're there, we're doing really good stuff. And unfortunately, we just have to convince policymakers and the funders and the public that what we do can be translated. So on my end, sorry, I'm saying buong araw ko okay. Wrap up. I think in terms of convergence, Mommy asked about convergence. So I think it's important to think about the interfaces, and I speak from experience. And I was trained as an engineer, and now I do a lot of microbiology. And when I'm in front of microbiologists, I speak like an engineer, and when I'm in front of engineers, I speak like a microbiologist. So nobody can say that I'm, not really good. But that's important to have people who are trained deep in one area, but then also understand what's going on in adjacent fields and even other fields, because that's where we will get the innovation. So if we have more engineers who can understand microbiology, and maybe microbiologists who can understand a little bit of engineering, right? Just understanding, a little bit of the computational side, a little bit of processing, bioreactors. How can we scale these things up? I think that will go a long way. So for us, we look at education, and I think there's a whole group on education, right? You can think of it, we say T-shaped, right? Deep and broad, right? And it's at the interfaces that we actually can get a lot of these advances. And if we do that, we talk amongst ourselves, not just amongst microbiologists, but we involve some of the engineers, we involve some of the other allied professions, and we partner with everyone, and we solve these problems interdisciplinarily. I think we will have more impact. But obviously, a lot of it is really just also implementation, and for that we need funding. We need funding on the implementation side, we need funding on the research side. So I think with Ma'am Giselle, they were able to have these collaborations and get funding from other countries, right? And also from UP, and so that's what we have to do is almost be creative about how we do these things. And if we convince the policymakers, I think we have people from DOST-STII, si Ma'am Mate is here, and they understand these things, and hopefully we get a lot more people into it, a lot more research, and a lot more translational research. And unti-unti, it's not overnight, but we're doing really good work. So I'm sorry, I'll end there. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Reyes. We'll have more after the next two speakers, but we'll entertain one more question for Dr. Concepcion. Yes, please introduce yourself.
Pleasant morning to each and everyone. I am Professor Divine Reyes, and also a media practitioner writing for several community papers all over the Philippines. My question is addressed to Dr. Gisela Concepcion. Good morning, nice to see you again. You said that the presence of this sulfidic bacteria in the environment of Sultan Kudarat is very prevalent. But I know from you, Ma'am, based on the studies and experience you had, what is there at Sultan Kudarat? Why these kind of bacteria are tried in that area? And do you think there's a tendency also that those bacteria will be present also within the vicinity of Mabini?
Thank you so much for asking that. So we were told that historically in that area there used to be a logging operation. So then nagkaroon ng typhoon. Nahulog ang mga logs lahat sa marine lake. So punong-puno ngayon yan ang wood. So that's a perfect scenario for eutrophication, for consumption of oxygen, and the production of a sulfuric acid. So now our UPB master student, PJ Domingo, is going to try to look at those bacteria in the environment, and together with our chemical oceanographer Caroline Harawia in MSI, we're also looking at the chemistry of that environment. Fast forward to Mabini, Batangas, we've seen this same kufus now in wood, but in decaying wood. So naturally decaying wood, that's part of the environment. And there is a cycle. And so you might say, yes, that there would be these types of kufus or other shingles, and they're sulfur oxidizing bacteria. We visited this last time a hot spring with sulfur in the Mapini area. So Lilibet and our team already went there. But we did not find the kufus there. So what's great about this research is there's lots of mystery. Still lots of mysteries. Yes.
May I have a follow-up question, Dr. Concepcion? You stated also in the rationale of this forum that there is a need to preserve and protect various microbial ecosystems which may be adversely affected by climate change and anthropogenic activities. may we know if there is a specific project when it comes to preservation and protection, besides all your effort that you have exerted, which deals on this? Thank you.
So, well, at the Marine Science Institute, we collaborate closely with the Department of Agriculture, BFAR, Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, and President Rodora is constantly in communication with them. She will reply to that message, but on our own, we're also already submitting a proposal again to an international body, the UNESCO, no less than the UNESCO. I was invited to submit a proposal to create a Center of Excellence Category 2, to create a Center for Marine Biotechnology, Mariculture, and Ocean Fisheries. It's been endorsed by the President of the University of the Philippines. It's now on the tables of our secretaries for endorsement to the UNESCO Director General. They're not giving us money, but there in our proposal, we included 23 training courses, one of them on marine pollution, including management of plastics, because we said within the Marine Science Institute, we have experts who are willing and able to train our SUC and LGU advocates in ways to handle pollution. And we have collaborators abroad who can help us. Secondly, we already pointed out 5 model projects that MSI is undertaking, led by the projects at the now Marine Laboratory, which is led by our Deputy Director for the Are you still the Director? Immediate past Director. Yes. So we have these 5 models. And this is what I wanted to say. If you want to talk to Senator Villar, tell her, okay, you dare her. You tell her, give us the money and we will bring you the warm bodies who can train your LGUs and your university and your ganyan community on pollution management. 3 types. I always remember what academician Virgie Cuevas said on social innovation. In the forum on social innovation, she said, the poorest of the poor, the communities, the coconut farmers, the abaca farmers who are up to now earning only 4,000 to 5,000 a month, and now the rice farmers. And even poorer are the fishing communities, 4,000 to 5,000. So let us see, is there a mayor there who is cooperative? You need a cooperative LGU. So then you start analyzing what the factors are, the inputs and the outputs of pollution. You can now bring in some instruments. I think Doralyn has some instruments already in San Agustin that she can make use of. But there are instruments in the, that are already designed for the field. Most important is the scientists must have the right sampling design, must ask the right questions. Hindi lang naman basta dadali mo equipment doon, training. Kailangan merong leader na magtatanong ng tamang question na may sasagot si Senator Villar. Okay? So I think, imbis na usap tayo ng usap o sulat ng sulat, sige, put the money where the mouth is. Lagay ng proposal dyan na malinggit lang. One for an urban, poor community, Tondo. The other one is for a rural, poor community and a marine coast or terrestrial. And then, sige, bigyan na ng pondo.
In the interest of time, I'm going to be very brief. Okay, brief naman ako palagi. So I'd like to address the suggestion, a comment from the press. I think you're a lady from the media. Okay, familiar your face mo. Okay. So the matter of protecting and conserving or preserving the environment is not the concern alone of the scientists and the managers. It's the concern of everyone. So I think all, if not almost all of the projects of the government and the NGOs, and there are a lot of them, no? Ang dami, no? Siguro yung iba may convergence, may divergence, and so on. So I think yung palagi namin sinasabi, ang tao talagang siguro hindi pa naiintindihan talaga kung ano yung environment, no? So yung media actually kailangan tumulong dyan. Lagi ko sinasabi, ang paborito kong channel ay NHK World of Japan. Kasi you have their almost every hour yata, on the hour, merong science, technology, humanities, arts, and so on. Okay? So, sabi ko nga, kung ABS-CBN at saka GMA, ganun lang mag-planning ng program, siguro magkakaroon ng konting pagbabago sa attitude ng mga Pilipino. Now, mahaba rin yung usapan niyang ecosystem environment. So, it will take me also a day to talk about it. Now, I'm going to address the concern of Senator Villar is the head of the Senate Committee on Environment. So bago pa lang siya. I went there on the hearing about pollution. So I represented NAST. And then there was one question that no one could answer. So I raised my hand. And so I was able to explain to them that there is a life cycle of all matter, whether paper, plastic, or so on. So you consider the energy, the material, and so on and so forth. And only the scientists and the engineers can explain this. Okay, so she was convinced, I think, that we can help them. So yung budget for science and technology, I think she would be very open to this. And then she got my phone number and so on. So we can talk to her. Okay, if we want to talk to her on some things, I think we can talk to her. So yun na lang. Sige, thank you.